Hey folks, Amanda here. Just a quick heads up that from time to time, the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast does include some adult language. So if you've got kids with you, you may just want to hold on to this episode to listen to a little later. Enjoy! Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. I'm Amanda Solman, and along with Mark Jewell, your host for this show and the creator of the Surviving to Thriving movement. Each week, we'll dive into the mindsets that keep us in survival mode and learn how to get on the path to a truly thriving life. If you're looking for a wake-up call and want some valuable tools to get there, you have come to the right place. After all, survival is dead. It's your time to thrive today. Now, let's head over to the show. Hey everyone, this is Amanda. I know you just heard my voice giving the intro, but I want to give you a little bit of a setup for what you're going to hear on the podcast episode today. This is going to be a little bit different. So this is a little sneak peek into one of our coaching calls. Recently, Mark did a coaching call with a group of folks from all over the country. But what he talked about is the hero's journey. Now, if you're really big into movies or novels like I am, this might be a concept you've heard before, but he's going to really dive into how we can apply the idea of the hero's journey to our own lives. So where you're going to pick up here in the coaching call is when Mark starts to dive into that hero's journey concept. So with that, enjoy.
I want you to think, we've all got that probably that favorite movie that you've seen along the way. Somebody who has accomplished, some sort of extraordinary feat, right? So I always think about Rocky. I've got the entire Rocky series on my Apple TV that I can pull up at any time. That's a great example. Somebody brought up Gladiator on the last call as an example of somebody who kind of went from surviving to thriving in their own way on their what we call the hero's journey. So just kind of curious, what's that movie for you? So Chris, why don't you start us off? What's a movie that comes to mind that's got that person that kind of goes from zero to hero, either unexpectedly or whatever, in the movie?
Well, Rocky's mine, but Rocky IV has got to be the best one.
Okay.
That's the one I like. And beyond that, it's not really a movie, and despite your allegiance to football teams, the story and background on Tom Brady, I've looked that up on YouTube, and it's how he came up through college and was going through the mill, and when he was going through the draft, and what he accomplished when everybody said, "You're not supposed to be here."
Right.
It was pretty damn cool. I go back to that one a lot.
You bet. Good stuff. What was it? Did he even get drafted, or was it like 11th round or 6th round or something like that?
It was 6th round.
Yeah.
And you listen to the reports that the scouts were given whenever they were talking about him, and it's like, he's too skinny, he's not athletic, he's the slowest one out here, he can't throw. It just on and on and on. And it's pretty amazing what he did. In spite
Chris, didn't he come in and call his dad to say, "Hey, I got to get my resume ready. I don't think I'm gonna get drafted." And so, how do you make a resume? And he was to that point, wasn't he? He was about ready to write football off because he didn't think he was gonna get drafted.
Yeah, and if you look it up, there's the story whenever he walked up to the owner of the Patriots was pretty cool. He introduced himself, and the owner said, "Yeah, I know who you are. You're like our 6th round draft pick." And Brady looked at him and said, "No, I'm the best choice this team has ever made."
Well, that's right there.
That's some certainty.
Well, I always refer back to that because you hear that a lot. If you listen to everybody else, you never get anywhere.
Yeah.
It all comes back to you. Right,
Yep.
Mark?
You got it, buddy. You got it. We keep learning that one over and over.
Yep.
All right, John, how about you? What's the movie or the story resonate with?
I've got a couple. You know, I love the movie Hoosiers.
Yep.
You know, little bitty small town, country town. Boys go to state basketball tournament and knock off David knocks off Goliath, so to speak.
Yeah, there you go.
And so, you know, to me, that's just raised in a rural Texas town and things like that. Never got that position, obviously, but you see that and you think, well, David can knock off Goliath every once in a while. And if you get everybody playing on the same team, you can do that. So, you know.
Cool. You got it, man. Love it. That's a great one. Okay. What's your second one? What's your other one?
Another one is a Time to Kill. You know, John Grisham movie that Matthew McConaughey played in. But, you know, I mean, you look at that attorney that takes on carries the black man in an area that not because of race, but because he does something that Jake has told us to do something, be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think? I mean, you know, and so I know it's a fiction and things like that, but that's every once in a while we have to sometimes go against what those around us think. So that'd be my second one.
So the other interesting thing about that is isn't McConaughey a Longhorn?
He is a Longhorn. Yeah.
Is that okay for you to be cool?
Oh yeah. The older you get, you understand that politics and you can't take that away from what they how they don't let that get in the way of them being a good actor or a singer or whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah, I just giving you a hard time.
Oh,
I know. I spent some time down in Texas, so I know what a big deal football is.
It is, and you know, it's a great rivalry, but it's you know, it's a healthy rivalry.
Yeah.
So that's what you like about it. That's what I like about it. You know.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Good stuff. All right, Kyle. How about you?
Well, Star Wars is kind of one that I always revert back to. I mean, there's a ton of stuff in there that you can kind of walk through, and you can go all the way from, from the Luke, the Skywalker to, all the way back to Yoda or whatever. So a lot of variable in that, and that's kind of always been one, and that dates me back to the 80s. So there you go.
Yeah, there it is. Well, and I don't think that necessarily dates anybody because those things have been pretty timeless, and there's quite a few Star Wars fans. That's one that I've been actually kind of queuing up in my kids' minds is, I've seen all the movies, but, they haven't seen them yet, and they're kind of getting just about old enough where they can start getting into it a little bit. So,
well, what's difficult is they play 1 and then 6 and then 3 and then 2 and then 5, and so if you could get the damn things in order, you could actually make sense of them.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the interesting things from that is when when he finally fights Darth Vader, right, and then cuts his head off and the helmet pops open and it's him.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That should tell you something right there. I think that's one of the biggest lessons. Any of us fighting our enemy, right, and then you find out that it's always you.
Yeah.
So anyway, a lot of information right there. So Russell, finish us up, man. What's your top movie?
My two top movies are one's a miniseries, the other's a movie. The miniseries is Band of Brothers.
Okay, yeah.
And that Colonel Winter, who started out in North Georgia training these guys, and they all came together, a group of ragtag boys from all over the country.
Yeah.
Went on through D-Day invasion and that personal leadership skills. And then the other one is The Longest Day. Of Normandy, D-Day itself had John Wayne, had all these great characters, and all a little bit of those individual heroism on that day to accomplish the mission. It was all about somebody got killed or somebody didn't do it, but somebody will step up and keep moving. And just because they had changes and constant change in battle, the plan never changed. Hit the big, take the, I don't know. That's kind of how I look at life. Don't never stop. It's all about drive. Things may change at the top, but you got your job on the ground. If you execute, the man beside you execute, and everybody executes, you'll keep moving, whatever happens.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's why I look at it.
Yeah.
Love it. I love it. All right. So one of the reasons I bring that up here today is, it doesn't matter which movie we just mentioned or which story background, Tom Brady, any of us, it's what any of those groups or any of those individuals in those movies go through is what we call the hero's journey. And the hero's journey, what's interesting about it, I recently watched a documentary about it on YouTube. The hero's journey is really quite predictable, right? Now, we're always surprised. There's always suspense and drama when we're watching the movie, right? And anybody that who's going through a challenging time or an extraordinary circumstance, you don't always know what's going to happen. But one thing that we do know is that any of us that goes through an extraordinary circumstance, or any of those characters in those movies or the people in those stories, we know that when they go through that extraordinary circumstance, we know that they're going to come out braver, better, more famous, more talented, more something, right? They awaken, so to speak. And so we know that that's a thing. What was interesting is, let's take Rocky, as an example. Everybody most people have seen that, and they get the storyline, right? In Rocky 1, at least, the first one, like, he's just a guy, 30 years old, surviving life, working a job he's not that passionate about, knowing that it's a dead end, wanting to have more in life, meets a girl, gets an opportunity, starts to wake up a little bit, then gets an opportunity to fight Apollo Creed. And then the whole rest of the movie is all the trials and tribulations that he goes through in his extraordinary circumstance, which is to go from nobody to getting on stage with the most famous fighter on the planet at that point, right? And so it's all about that. And what's interesting is you take that story, that is the hero's journey. You take that concept, right? If that's a model, then I can place that into any of the movies or any of the situations that you guys mentioned. And we know that that is a process with a predictable outcome, right? It's a process with a predictable outcome. What's interesting is why. Like, when I started learning about the hero's journey, I was curious about, like, okay, well, why? And so in this documentary, as I'm learning why it works, we can go all the way back to the very, very early times when you were born and somebody was reading to you, or you were watching little videos or whatever. When you were a baby, when you're a kid, you have been programmed with a mental construct that dates back to the beginning of time, because we've always taught through story, right? Historically, before we had books, we carried legend on through story. And so this is literally almost baked into our DNA. But at least as soon as we're born, we start getting programmed with stories, right? You think Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Goldilocks had to go through an extraordinary circumstance, in order to become, get to the other side. Little Red Riding Hood had to go through an extraordinary circumstance, right, in order to reach an end result. Now, we don't learn a lot about the lessons that come from that in those particular books, but it goes on, right? So we all started probably hearing Bible stories, right, when we were little kids. Everybody's aware, and somebody even mentioned it, David versus Goliath. It's one of the first Bible stories that you hear of, right? Because we all resonate with the underdog fighting the big giant, right? We hear about Moses, right, on his journey, right? He's called out of Egypt to go lead the people, and he goes up the mountain, gets the tablets, comes back down. Then he spends 40 years in the desert, right, with his people, going through all these trials and tribulations. So we hear about, we start learning the mental construct through story early on in life. Even the story of Jesus is a tale of somebody who went on a hero's journey, right? Went through an extraordinary circumstance and eventually gets sacrificed, and that's what it took for him to transcend. And so we all get it. Now, here's the interesting thing. This surprised me. So when you guys all saw my triangle thing, the Survivor's Guide to Thriving, right, back in the classroom, you guys got the concept. What was interesting is, when I first created that, first wrote it and started teaching the early versions of it, what was intriguing to me was how simple it was for people to understand, and what the level of uptake was, because people just seemed to get it. And they're like, yeah, I get that. I can see myself going on that surviving to thriving journey. And then about 6 weeks ago, I watched this documentary on the hero's journey that we just, been talking about here for the last 15 minutes. And I realized that the pathway to go from surviving all the way to transcendence, to thriving, and then to transcendence is exactly the same steps that a hero goes on, from breaking free of their survival mentality all the way to where they're thriving, to where they're to the next level and even transcending, right? John and I were just joking. We talked after our last coaching call. We had the same conversation with the Midwest crew up here. We were kind of joking, like, even in Rocky, right? We didn't stop at Rocky. We've got Rocky 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there's all the spinoffs. Right? He just keeps transcending, making more movies. Have you guys ever heard, by the way, this is a little sidebar, have you heard the story of how Sylvester Stallone came to star in that movie?
Mm-mm.
So he wrote Rocky. He wrote the original Rocky. Okay. He wrote the screenplay. He wrote the script. He wrote the whole thing. And so at this point in his life, he's nobody, right? He's had a couple things, but he's got no money. He's doing whatever he can to get by. I don't know if it was his first wife or a girlfriend, a close girlfriend, leaves him because he's such a broke loser at this point. Okay. But he writes this script and he believes in it so much. He goes out, he starts shopping it, to these different movie producers. And he comes across somebody who wants to buy the movie from him. $125,000. They're going to buy it. Okay. He says, that's great, but I'm going to be in it. I'm going to be Rocky. And they're like, you're nobody. Nobody knows who you are. You're kind of ugly. Like, no, not a chance. Right? Not a chance at all. You're not, we're not going to do it. And so he's like, fine. So time goes by. They come back to him and they double it. Okay. They're like, $250,000 will buy the script, but you're not in it. He's like, no. At this point, he runs out of money. He's got no money. He literally is standing outside a liquor store, and some guy says, he's standing outside a liquor store with his dog, and the guy about to go in the liquor store says, I love your dog, cool dog, whatever. He sells the guy the dog for like $25 just so he had some money to eat. And that dog was the only thing that he cared about in life at that point, the only living thing that was there for him, that was loyal to him. And he had to sell his freaking dog in order to get paid, just to survive. Right? Producers come back. They offer him $350,000 for the script. Offer him $350,000 for the script. And he says, no, I'm not going to do it. Not unless I'm in the movie. They finally come back and they say, okay, you can be in the damn movie, but you're only going to get 10% of what we offered you. He says, deal. So he turns down $350,000 for $35,000.
Wow.
What the first thing he did was went back to that liquor store. He stood outside and waited for days until that guy came back, and he ended up giving up half of that money to get his damn dog back.
Wow.
But that's how it all got started. I mean, that tripped up his whole career from there. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, that in and of itself, the one of the most famous movies of all time, like, was literally created by somebody who underwent the hero's journey. He was a nobody. You know what I'm saying? And right. So, I mean, he literally went from surviving through, discovering that, hey, I've got something here. I've got something that people want, but literally had to continue going through the suffering, more and more suffering, in order to get hit, to achieve his dream, to actually get what it was that he wanted. So one of the things that I mentioned before, right? It is a process, right? The hero's journey, the survivor's guide to thriving. If you can correlate those two things, it is a process, and the outcomes are predictable. We know that if you go through a process, you go through discovery, you can break free, you can get out of, survival. We know that if you're willing to go through the pain, the fear, the opportunity, and solve that pain, fear, opportunity with driving effort, we know that you'll awaken. We know that you're going to get an outcome on the other side. We know that it works every single time. So I want to pause here and just kind of come over to you guys. And here's the one question, right? If I want to think about it from your perspective as a thriving leader, or even think about maybe your spouse, your customer, your kids, your friends, like if you could go on if you could purposely pick or create your extraordinary circumstance, knowing that on the other side you can have anything that you wanted, what would you be willing to put yourself through? Or on the other side, what if you could create an extraordinary circumstance for somebody that you cared about, what would you be willing to put them through in order to help them level up and achieve new greatness, whatever that looks like for them in their life? So I'm just kind of curious, who's willing to go first?
I'll kick it off. I think it's kind of interesting because I'm at a crossroad right now. Both my kids, I've got a 16-year-old boy that has been playing hockey since he was about 4.
Yep.
4 or 5 years old, and a daughter that's 20, and she's played at the collegiate level. But my boy's getting ready to make that possible journey into the collegiate level of hockey. And
sure.
Some days you'd like to kick him in the ass because a 16-year-old doesn't understand what he's got in front of him, and living that, taking that, and moving forward. And that would be, when I grew up, I didn't have that ability. I didn't have that opportunity to play. And but to work with him and try to help him understand what's in front of him, I would love to live that for him, but I can't, obviously, because I don't have I'm not 16 years old anymore. But but that is something that no, just as a opportunity to move forward, that would be something that would be very, very cool. And I wish I could do that for him, but I can't.
Yep. Yeah. Love it. So as you kind of take a step back, I mean, is there is that enough? Is there more that you can set up for him or push him into? I mean, other uncomfortable, as Jake says, get comfortable being uncomfortable kind of things?
There is. And as a parent, you have to be careful not to push too hard, because then the pushback is, I'm done, and I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think he's very solid in what he does. He loves what he does, and he's been doing it for so long, and it's not a job for him. But I think he still enjoys it. But I think at the same token, I don't think he really understands what he has. I mean, and everybody thinks their kid's great. He has a talent that right now there's probably 5% of the people in his category that he have that talent that he has. And so, but I don't think he understands that. And you try to explain that to him and try to get him motivated with that. And it just, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you have to put yourself in the mind of a 16-year-old too. What's the most important thing to a 16-year-old?
Yeah, exactly.
It isn't working your ass off for something. It might be just loafing it and sleeping in until 10 and Snapchatting your girlfriends or the girls or whatever,
Yeah, I gotcha. So, it's interesting. I mean, it's predictable, right? I can sit here and see, and I was the same way when I was 16, just kind of skating through. Those are all the important things for me, and then something happens that helps you discover. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So the question I always ask is like, okay, is there something I can do for my clients, or is there something I can do for my kids or my wife that would help them, discover, hey, there's more available for you here. Like, what's the thing? I had it the hard way. I ran, when I was 16, I ran my Mazda B2000 pickup headlong into a John Deere 4340 at 35 miles an hour. I was pinned up underneath that thing. My head was where the rock box on the front of that tractor should have been. That's where my head was. They had, get this, the kid driving that tractor, he was pulling a chopper and a chopper box on a gravel road on the opposite side of a hill, driving on the wrong side of the road. That's why I hit him. I came up over the top of the hill, and he was on the wrong side of the road. But he was in my class. He was in my FFA chapter. I found out when I got back to school after, being in the hospital for a couple weeks, that they had taken the rock box off the day before.
Oh, wow. Man.
That's where my head was. Right. Jaws of life are loud, by the way. Like, I mean, you don't even need to experience that. I'll just tell you that right now. That's fucking loud. So, especially when your femur's in a couple of different pieces and like that hurts right there. Anyway, but that's the thing. Can we, I had to have that very difficult discovery moment. The thing I learned is like, hey man, life is short and you're here for something. You better get after it.
Right.
you know. But even after that, I didn't get it, you know. I mean, my dad still had to chew my ass a bunch and push me, and he wasn't like, I'll be honest, like Kyle, like you and I are probably pretty soft compared to him. He didn't care.
Yeah, my dad was the same way, you know.
Yeah, or at least he thought he didn't care. But.
Yeah, there was no hugs and kisses, but at the end of the day, he'd have been there if you needed him.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So, John, why don't you go ahead? What comes through for you, man?
Well, Kyle, to your point exactly. 10 years ago, I was in Chris's position, just taking William to college. You know, when they get 16, 17, you know, you can't tell a teenager boy much, right? But you see them progress, and now he's 27, obviously. Anyway, there's hope there, Kyle.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I know it, but you know what I'm saying? A friend of mine told me we go from hero to zero when they hit 16, 17, you know, because we don't know anything. But, you know, nothing really comes to mind on something like that, Mark, and that may be a easy way out, but I don't know, you know, we've been there for our kids. We've done those things. So I don't know what would give up to help somebody right now.
Yeah.
I've got a brother in a tough situation, and he knows that we care about him and things like that. But I say it this way: we can't help. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And I think he's finally coming around at 54 years old that, hey, mom, aunt, brother, they do care about me. And so we're trying to get that wrapped up. And, you know, I kind of said something about this, what about the 14th of July or something. So, but we're coming back. We're getting back to where I think we're making progress. We're making progress in a very good way. So, you know,
cool.
If I could tell my brother that, hey, get your shit together, it's gonna be okay. You know, I mean, it's taking you 54 years to do this. It's gonna be okay. You know, and it's not your big brother telling you.
You bet.
How it's got to be done. So.
You got it. All right, Russell, go ahead. What's the extraordinary circumstance you're willing to go through?
Think about your hero's journey and mapping it out. And then I thought about a thing I read one time, you know, the Medal of Honor recipients. They've done psych studies that can show no one personality to become a Medal of Honor winner. I mean, it's just the situation, timing. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, as John says, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink it. You know, we all want the best for our kids, our family. But it all takes that personal responsibility, you know. Your own, you know. You can watch somebody surviving and you can offer them discovery mode and you can try to push them up the pyramid. They have to do it. Of course, I have to do mine. My wife has to do hers. You know, we all have to do our own. So, you know, I wish I could wave a magic wand, make everybody, you know, transcendent.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean, you know, it comes up to each impact. You know, we all have to hit that rock bottom at some point in our life.
Yeah.
But you got to be there to help them pull them up, you know. You know, always lend a hand to a fallen friend.
You bet.
You know, always help people. That's the way I look at it. You always help people up. Don't push them down.
Right.
Yeah.
So whoever it is, my child, my wife, myself, you know, I pull myself up by bootstraps, help my other friends, peers, and community members. You know, I'm gonna offer my hand up instead of down.
Got it.
That's what I look at it. And then it's their responsibility. You know, I'll be there to support them and mentor them and help them all.
Yeah.
But about saying no one personality to make a hero, and it's easy in a movie to make a hero. That's why I like real movies like Band of Brothers, based on real people, real life. Right. You know, we all Rudy, we all love all those great stories, but they're stories. I mean, Rudy may be true, excuse me, that's true, but a lot of them are just stories, you know.
Right.
But I kind of associate with real things. Oh no, I mean, I'm not trying to cop out, but that's the way I look at it. Life, you know. Yeah. If I help somebody up, they'll help me up. I hope.
Yeah. You
bet.
That's
where I believe in my fellow man. You know, I feel like if I help them, they'll help me. And not all do that. And you learn that the hard way. But you don't expect.
Yeah. But Russell, we always got to take that. We got to take the high road, Russell. You know that because it's easy. It is easy to go, oh, forget that. You know.
Yeah.
And so.
Anyway, that's kind of what I look at, Mark. I ain't trying to cop out on you, you know, but that's why I look at.
Yeah,
I
get you.
It comes down. You know, maybe that's why I was raised and stuff. You know, oh, that's Star Wars. I hate Star Wars. That's the worst movie. I was raised on the Battle of Britain or 60 Seconds Over Tokyo. That's kind of what I was raised on. That kind
of. There you go.
I relate to that kind of stuff,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it says a lot about your personality, right? Because a lot of it is more team-based, groups working together, which if you're in a position of leadership, I hope that you're talking about things like that, because that actually means something, you know what I'm saying? When talking about getting people working together, that's good. So, I mean, I could even reframe the question, like, what would I be willing to frame up for my team as an experience to go through, in order to help them level up? Like, what would I be willing to do? And I think that's where, like I was earlier this year.
That's what we did. Gave them a healthy budget.
Yep.
I talked budget. You got to hit those goals. That's that's like
Right. Well, that's just it. I went. It was even earlier in 2017 where we just realized we were a little undersold and a little overspent, and I just I was kind of at the point I didn't want to borrow anymore. Really, it was just the point I couldn't borrow anymore. And I said, hey, to Wade, I said, here's the deal, buddy. You got 3 months, right? Or we stop getting paid. Figure it out. and he's been crushing it ever since. But it took me the extraordinary circumstance I had to be willing to go into as a business owner and as the leader of the company. I had to get transparent and real with my team, right? And I had spent a year avoiding getting real and transparent, because I just wanted to protect everybody so they could do their job. Right. I want to protect Wade so he can just go sell stuff. I just want to protect Amanda so she can just manage the logistics and all the emails and all the events and everything that she does. And it wasn't until I got super real and transparent. I said, hey, I can't handle all this anymore. It's too much work. What can you guys pick up and take on? Right. And all of a sudden, I'm able to spend more time coaching, selling, speaking, growing the business, which is my strengths. And now, Amanda's all of a sudden she's running QuickBooks and she's having fun. I'm like, how could you possibly have fun running? She's like, hey, where do I find this little detail? She's like, hey, while I'm at it, I'm just going to take all the last 12 months and I'm going to reconcile every single expense. I'm like, you're going to do what? So as long as I'm at it, I'm like, there's thousands of them, she's like, that's fine. And so, it blows my mind that somebody's willing to do that, but that's a thing she was willing to do. Anyway, so sometimes we get to create those extraordinary circumstances. Chris, how about for you, man? I know you've been through some, you go through some stuff, but what's the extraordinary circumstance you'd be willing to create for yourself or others?
First one would have to be for my youngest son, because I see a lot of myself in him, and he's like Kyle said, and like you said, when he's 15-year-old, you can't tell him much, and he's talented. Everybody thinks their kid's the best, but I mean, he does have some talent in art, music, and theater, and he really likes it, which was amazing because he was always the quiet one that sat in the corner of the room and would never interact. And then he got in his first play, and it was a musical, and he had the lead, and it was just,
oh wow,
he came alive when that happened. But I see him now. He hits tries a little bit of a lot of different things, but never really gets engaged. A typical teenager. What I'd love to create for him is a situation that, gets him engaged and where he has to perform and do it on his own. I think it would be really good for him. And it's something that draws him out. And for me, it took a long time. I had to learn a lot on my own, and the things I went through with family business and changes and self-confidence and everything else. If I could put him through that in a condensed few years instead of 20, I'd do that in a heartbeat, because it would pay off so big for him in the end. And, for myself, in terms of me and my wife and what we want to do with our life and where we'd like to be.
Yep.
I'd be willing to go back to ground zero and start all over in terms of career, work, whatever, with that payoff in the end. Yeah. I mean, I'd walk away from everything I know and start all over if that was what it took to do. And that financial independence we're looking for, where she'd be able to do what she wanted. And, we've had a lot of dreams and things. It's always the someday stuff. And someday becomes no day if you don't do it.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yep. Absolutely.
We've been talking a lot about that.
Cool.
So those are my two.
Yeah, I love it. It's good stuff, man.
I told Chris, just don't leave. Don't leave us, Chris. Everybody's leaving. I told him he cannot leave. I'm packing my bags, and Chris packs his bag. I promise.
We're coming looking for you, Chris.
Yeah.
No, don't take. I'm not going
There
anywhere.
you go. There you go. All right, John, my sound coming through okay still? I was breaking up a little bit there for a second, but all right, we're good. All right, so here's the thing, right? As I mentioned before, the hero's journey, the survivor's guide to thriving, is a process or processes with a predictable outcome, right? We know that if we go on these journeys, that we can create up leveling in our life in a number of different ways. A couple of different things. Number one, I think most people don't. 95% of people won't choose into the journey because they're scared of what could happen or what might not happen or what other people will say, what somebody will think, or probably more likely what they'll think of themselves if it doesn't go right. You know what I'm saying? And so I think about a lot of the guys that you get to engage with and work with at the co-op or at the dealer or whatever, who's selling your stuff. Like, you know, like I've mentioned the last couple of weeks, we have a lot of influence that we don't give ourselves credit for in their lives to help them potentially discover that they could have more, they could do more, they could be better, they could dream bigger, go further, right? Whatever. And I think that's a piece of it. We could help set people, at Russell's point, can't push them. Probably can't push them down the stairs. I mean, maybe I could. I don't know. But I mean, probably won't. Probably not a good idea. But could I set up a scenario? Could I do something to help them frame up their own journey? And the second point is, I get to choose into my journey. Right. So if we know that the process is there and we know it's a thing we can do, it's no different than if you know there's something that you can do in a farmer's field or for your customer that will help them grow more or do business better. You can put them through a process or create that. This is the exact same thing for us. Right. Here's the thing. And I get to choose into the extraordinary circumstance. You want to get healthier? You can choose into a circumstance where you work out different and eat different. Right. If you want to get more connected to God or more in touch with the universe or whatever you want to call it, then you can meditate, you can study, you can read the Bible, do your devotions, go to church, you can invest the time, go to study groups, whatever, right? You want to have a better relationship with your wife, you can choose into creating the dates, creating date night, creating time, creating polarity, right? Sometimes the journey we're not willing to opt into in our relationship is to tell our spouses no. Right. Yeah, we just came our bank account looks really good right now because we just got a big check to go do the work on our house because we got hit with a hailstorm, right? So we got the first half up front, and so we got $30,000 to go to work on. Okay. Well, my wife is thinking about doing some other stuff, and so she called me a little bit ago. She's like, "Hey, I'm in Nebraska Furniture Mart. I don't know if you guys have ever been there, but it's the Mall of America for furniture, you guys." and she's like, "Hey, can I, so we're right now she's working on building her Airbnb empire, and we're gonna the house across the street is up for sale, and they want to do a land contract." Well, we looked at it and we're like, "Hey, this might be a good deal. We actually can probably turn a profit on this thing in about 2 or 3 years. So we're gonna buy it." And so she's like, "But I got to put furniture in it so I can start listing it on Airbnb." And so she frames this up to me. She's like, "Hey, how about I'm at the Furniture Mart. How about I buy us a new bed, and then we'll take our old bed and we'll put it over in the new house."
And you said,
and I said,
yes.
I said, no. I said, I know the bank account looks good right now, babe, but I said, we're just going to get ourselves in trouble. We're going to create more scarcity. I said, having a new bed. She's like, well, I'm like, and I said, I know the bed that you want is like $2,000, babe. Like, we're not going to do it, And she's like, well, what if I find one for like 500 or less? And like, guys, this is 1 minute before we started this call. All right. This is 1 minute ago, right? Or about 53 minutes ago when this is going down. And I'm just like, I said, are you negotiating with me? Right? Like, are we negotiating? She's like, well, yeah. I'm like, no, just don't buy it. I said, we got other stuff to do. We got to make sure we got enough money to reside the house and paint it and do all the stuff. So let's just not do it. And like, she knew that it was the right decision, right? But she needed me to say it. And what that does is that creates polarity. And I know that the reason that we ended up almost divorced 3 years ago is because for 7 years, I wasn't willing to do that. I would have caved 100% of the time. And so I just had a conversation with a client earlier today who hasn't been willing to have those conversations with his wife. And as a result, he's miserable in his business because, she's putting her fingers in where they probably don't need to be all the time, because he's not claiming his space as a king. So anyway, that's those are some of the things that we're not willing to do. But you think about in the business, what are the extraordinary circumstances that I need to be willing to go through, or that I could help others on my team go through in order to, complete the hero's journey to go from surviving to thriving? What are my ability to contribute, right? We can frame anything that we want into that. And I think, like, if we frame it up in this way and we're willing to choose into those experiences rather than do it on accident, which is what everybody else does, I think we can accelerate business, we can accelerate our lives, we can accelerate our relationships and get what we want faster. Right? I'm not super impatient, you guys. Like, I'll wait, I'll wait to be, wealthy and whatever, and, have more of what I want money wise or whatever. But, I don't want to wait forever. And if I knew the path to expedite, then why wouldn't I take it? Right? If I knew that I could go through it. So that's the whole concept behind the hero's journey. I think from a thriving leader's perspective, that's a thing that we get to pay attention to and be present to, and remember that we get to either opt in or opt out of that activity. So something for you guys to consider. And I'm just going to say this, I think about what are some of the things that I would, these are the things I think about. I've had a lot of interstate time lately, a lot of trips back and forth from Minnesota. And so I think about these things. And so one thing I was thinking about was, with my old man, if I were to go back to November 10th, 1990, and I was in the frame of that picture when he gets shot, okay, and I know the bullet's coming, would I push him out of the way? Okay, would I push him out of the way of that bullet or not? Right, knowing the pain, the trauma, the PTSD, that he would go through as a result of getting shot in that deer hunting accident. And my initial answer is yes. Like, why wouldn't I push him out? Why wouldn't I save him? From all that trauma, from all that pain. But the part of the story, maybe I mentioned this, I told you guys this story back in the live event. Maybe not. I don't remember. I've told it a few times, but this is one of the lesser told stories that I have. So in the days following, he was in the hospital for 10 days after he got shot. Leading up to that event, he had just 7 years earlier beat cancer, right? He had crashed airplanes, right? When he was 5, he fell out of a second-story hayloft on his head, from the barn that he grew up milking cows in. And I mean, he had, a lot of these kind of things happen over the course of his life. But just in that 7 years, beat cancer, lost his business, gets shot in a 7-year time frame. Okay. And he was really, really struggling to deal with this, really struggling to take it all in. And so there was this man in our life, a local neighbor named Harold. Harold had studied to be a priest, but he never got ordained. He literally went up to the day before he was about to become an ordained priest, and then he backed out, went home, became a dairy farmer, got married, had kids. And so he was, but he was obviously super, he's always, like the good Catholic guy in the neighborhood. And he would call up to talk to my dad once in a while because my dad trapped fox on his land. And he'd just call up to talk to the old man. And if I'd answer, Harold on the other end would say, I'd say, "Hello, Jewell," and he'd say, "This is God speaking." He was that kind of guy. He was a character, and so super charismatic. Also sometimes a little bit inappropriate, just one of those guys you remember from your childhood. But he says, but my dad said, I think I need to talk to Harold. He's laying in the hospital. So my mom calls up Harold and asks him to come in. And they sit together that night, and Harold, Dad's trying to make sense of all this, trying to go through all this and process everything. And Harold said, I think you need to cry, and my old man never cried, like just always had everything bottled up. The emotion was always bottled up, never cried at all, that we knew of. And so Harold said, well, here's one thing I know that works. Are you ready to give your life up to the Lord? And he did. The old man committed right there, took the oath of giving his life up to the Creator, and he just poured. I mean, the emotion, at that point, what was he, 40, 50, almost 50 years old, 50 years of emotion comes pouring out of him, right? And as a result, so I was 9. So I was with my old man for 25 more years after that, right? Had him in my life. as a result, I grew up with a much more enlightened. Now, he was still a hard ass. He was still tough on me, right? But I grew up with a much more enlightened, with somebody with a greater perspective on the planet, somebody who was much more accepting than what my sisters grew up with, in their first 30 years. They're about 30 at that time. And so my life was much different. I would guarantee you that we're probably not sitting here today, having this conversation if that doesn't happen all those years ago. So if I go back into that scenario, do I push him out of the way? I mean, as tough as of a decision that, you just never know, right? We never know where the road's going to lead and what's going to happen. Like this is all hypothetical, but I look at that and I look at like, that is an integral part. And I was kind of, I frame it up this way. Like if the Lord wants to get a hold of you and get your attention, like if you don't pay attention, he's going to fucking shoot you. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to watch out.
Right.
But that's his hero's journey. Those are the trials and tribulations that he had to go through to create an environment that I could grow up in, to now, be, and grow up entrepreneurial and do all the things so that I would have the balls to create a business that could potentially impact the lives of thousands or more, And so some of those things have to happen. So the question becomes, and I'll just leave it with this and you guys can ponder it. What would you be willing to put yourself through? What would you be willing to put others through if it meant that they could have or become or do anything that they wanted or anything that they were put here to do?
Thanks for tuning in to the Survivor's Guide to Thriving podcast. You can find the show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in this episode by heading over to markjewelltraining.com/podcast. And if you feel so inclined, we'd love it if you could head over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. That's what helps us move up in the charts so that more people can find us and start their surviving to thriving journey. See you next week.